There are seasons in life when the greatest change does not arrive through excitement. It arrives through peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from having every answer. Not the kind that appears after every problem has been solved. But a quiet, unfamiliar peace that seems to arrive without asking permission. At first, it almost feels confusing, because for so many years, your soulmate had become accustomed to measuring life through movement, always planning, always solving, always preparing for the next responsibility. They believed that staying busy meant they were moving forward. Yet one morning something unusual happened. Nothing extraordinary took place. The sun rose as it always had. People followed their routines. The world continued without interruption. But inside them, there was silence. Not emptiness, not loneliness, a gentle stillness they could not explain. For a brief moment, they searched for the reason behind it. Had something changed? Had they forgotten an important responsibility? Was there something they should be worrying about? Their mind immediately began looking for a problem, because problems had always felt familiar, but there wasn't one. The peace remained. That experience stayed with them long after the morning ended. During work, they noticed they were less reactive. Conversations that once would have frustrated them now seemed easier to navigate. Small inconveniences no longer carried the same emotional weight. Instead of rushing through the day, they found themselves paying attention to ordinary moments they had ignored for years. The warmth of sunlight through a window, the laughter of strangers, the comforting rhythm of everyday life. These details had always existed. They had simply been too distracted to notice them. As the days passed, they began asking themselves a surprising question. When was the last time I allowed myself to simply exist without trying to fix something? The answer was difficult to remember. Somewhere along the way, they had confused constant effort with personal worth. If they were productive, they felt valuable. If they solved problems, they felt secure. If they stayed busy enough, they never had to sit quietly with themselves. Now life was offering them something completely different. It was offering presence. At first, presence felt unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. Without endless distractions, thoughts they had ignored began quietly surfacing. Not painful memories, not dramatic regrets, simply honest observations. They noticed how often they had rushed through meaningful conversations because another task demanded attention. They noticed how many beautiful moments had passed without being fully experienced because their mind was already living in tomorrow. Perhaps the greatest realization came one peaceful evening while watching the sky slowly change colors. For years they believed happiness would arrive after achieving enough success, enough security, enough certainty. Yet in that quiet moment they experienced something deeper than happiness, contentment. It asked for nothing. It proved nothing. It simply existed. That realization challenged one of the oldest beliefs they carried. They had spent years believing peace was the reward for completing life's journey. Now they wondered if peace had been available during the journey all along. Maybe they had simply never slowed down enough to notice it. As this awareness continued growing, they began making small changes. Not dramatic ones, gentle ones. They started leaving space in their schedule without feeling guilty. They took walks without checking their phone every few minutes. They listened more carefully when others spoke. They allowed silence to exist without rushing to fill it. To their surprise, life did not become less productive. It became more meaningful. The quality of their attention changed, and with it, the quality of every experience. Another unexpected truth slowly appeared. The peace they were feeling was not coming from the outside world. It was coming from the absence of constant resistance. For years they had quietly argued with reality. They resisted delays. They resisted uncertainty. They resisted endings. They resisted change. Without realizing it, that resistance had exhausted them far more than the circumstances themselves. Now, little by little, they were learning a different way to live. Acceptance, not giving up, not lowering expectations, simply allowing life to be experienced before immediately trying to control it. That shift felt incredibly freeing. They noticed they smiled more naturally. They laughed without forcing it. They slept more deeply. Even people around them began sensing something different. "You seem calmer," someone casually remarked. They smiled, not because they had discovered every answer, but because they were finally discovering that not every answer was necessary for inner peace. This realization became the beginning of a completely new relationship with themselves. Instead of constantly asking, "What should I do next?" they quietly began asking, "How do I want to experience this moment?" That one question changed everything. Because life was no longer becoming a series of obstacles to overcome. It was becoming a collection of moments waiting to be fully lived. And perhaps, for the first time in many years, their soul was finally beginning to feel at home within the life they had already been given. The quiet peace continued following them into places where anxiety once lived. At first they assumed it would disappear. Surely this was only a temporary feeling. Life would become busy again. Responsibilities would return with greater intensity. Old worries would reclaim their familiar place inside the mind. But something unexpected happened. The peace remained. Not every day felt perfect. Not every situation became easy. Yet beneath every challenge was a steady sense that they no longer needed to fight life in order to move through it. This realization became the foundation of an entirely new perspective. They began noticing how much energy they had spent trying to control things that were never truly theirs to control. Other people's opinions, perfect timing, future outcomes, unexpected changes. For years, they carried these invisible burdens without questioning whether they belonged to them at all. Now they gently began setting them down, one by one. Not because they stopped caring, but because they finally understood the difference between responsibility and control. Responsibility asked them to act with honesty. Control demanded certainty that no human being could ever possess. That distinction brought incredible freedom. Each day became a little lighter. Each conversation became a little more genuine. Each decision became less about fear and more about alignment. As this inner balance continued growing, they found themselves becoming more aware of the people around them. They noticed that many hearts were exhausted for the same reason they once had been. Everyone seemed to be chasing something just beyond the horizon. Another achievement, another answer. Another reason to finally believe they were enough. Watching this filled them with compassion, because they remembered living that way, always believing peace belonged somewhere in the future. Now they knew something different. Peace is not found at the end of the journey. It changes the way the journey is experienced. This understanding quietly reshaped every part of their daily life. Morning routines became moments of gratitude instead of preparation for stress. Meals became opportunities to slow down instead of tasks to complete quickly. Even silence became something they welcomed instead of avoided. For years, silence had felt uncomfortable because it revealed emotions they did not want to face. Now silence felt like home. It gave their heart room to breathe, room to reflect, room to remember who they were beneath every expectation they had placed upon themselves. Another beautiful lesson soon appeared. They realized they had spent much of their life trying to become someone worthy of peace. Now they understood that peace had never asked them to earn it. It only asked them to stop running from themselves. That realization softened something deep within. The harsh inner critic that once judged every mistake slowly lost its voice. In its place grew something far stronger, self-respect, not because they were perfect, but because they were finally learning to treat themselves with the same kindness they had always offered others. That kindness changed everything. They became more patient when progress was slow, more forgiving when old habits briefly returned, more willing to celebrate small victories that once seemed insignificant. Over time, they noticed another transformation. They were no longer making choices simply because they looked impressive. They were making choices that felt deeply true. Some opportunities no longer interested them. Some relationships naturally became quieter. New interests appeared without forcing them. It wasn't that life had become smaller. It had become clearer. Their heart was no longer chasing everything. It was choosing what genuinely mattered. This clarity influenced the way they viewed meaningful connections as well. They stopped asking whether every person would remain forever. Instead, they asked what each connection had come to teach them. Some taught courage. Some taught patience. Some taught healthy boundaries. Some revealed strengths they never knew existed. Every encounter carried wisdom. Nothing felt wasted anymore, not even the difficult chapters. Perhaps this became one of the greatest gifts of all. They no longer saw their past as a collection of mistakes. They saw it as a quiet education that had been preparing them for the life they were now capable of creating. And because of that, gratitude slowly replaced regret. The future also began feeling different. Not because they suddenly knew what would happen, but because they no longer believed uncertainty was their enemy. Uncertainty had introduced them to resilience. It had strengthened their intuition. It had taught them that some of life's greatest blessings arrive without warning. Why fear what had also shaped them into someone wiser? This question stayed with them. It reminded them that trust is not believing nothing difficult will ever happen again. Trust is believing they will meet whatever comes with an open heart. That confidence cannot be purchased. It cannot be borrowed from another person. It is quietly built through hundreds of ordinary days when someone chooses honesty over fear, patience over panic, and presence over distraction. Looking back, they realized the peace they had been searching for had never been hiding in another city, another relationship, another achievement, or another version of life. It had been waiting beneath the endless noise of trying to become someone else. Now that noise had finally grown quiet, and in its place they discovered something beautifully simple. They were enough exactly where this moment found them. Not finished, not flawless, still learning, still growing, still discovering new parts of themselves, yet completely worthy of living with an open heart today rather than waiting for a perfect tomorrow. Perhaps that is the quiet miracle this season has brought into their life. Nothing outside them needed to become extraordinary. Their way of seeing life became extraordinary. And once perception changes, the world itself begins to feel different. The same sunrise carries greater beauty. The same conversations hold deeper meaning. The same ordinary days become filled with gentle reminders that life has never asked anyone to rush toward happiness. It has only asked them to become fully present long enough to recognize that happiness has been quietly walking beside them all along. Now your soulmate understands something they once believed impossible. Peace is not the destination waiting at the end of healing. Peace is the companion that begins walking beside us the moment we stop resisting who we are. And perhaps, without even realizing it, that quiet companion has already begun leading them toward the most authentic chapter of their life yet.